Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bobble Pod. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the importance of communication, and I have a guest with me today, Duncan Lewis, which I'm excited to share this episode with. But before I begin, as always, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe on any podcast channel that you're listening to. And if you're on YouTube, hello YouTube, don't forget to subscribe and click on the bell notification for when our weekly episodes come out. I'm really excited to have Duncan Lewis on our episode today. So hi, Duncan. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So Duncan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a communication trainer, and my business, Eaglei, we support people to communicate their spoken messages in the most effective way and to present the best version of themselves. That's really what we do.
Fantastic. And how long have you been doing that for?
Almost 10 years now, Manni. I can't believe it's been that long.
I wish I'd been doing something for 10 years. Actually, I've been in the digital marketing field for over 10 years now. From my perspective, I'd probably say the earliest started in digital marketing was when I did my degree in marketing and advertising management. And then it led on to the journey I've had. How time flies, doesn't it, Duncan?
Absolutely. And no 2 days are the same, are you? I'm sure like you, we have such a diverse range of clients, literally that sort of one end of the spectrum is young people, students at school or college, university, through to senior leadership in business and everyone in between, because as you'll appreciate, communication, spoken communication is just so important to everyone.
Yeah, and on this podcast, for those listening, we're going to be talking about the importance of communication. And I understand that's more of a physical element, but we're also going to be talking about how you can transpire that into the digital world as well. Because in the modern world, augmented reality, virtual videos, video pitching, video calling, communications with clients, suppliers, team members is all done through Zoom. And we have Duncan, who is obviously unable to be with us in Leeds, but we've got him obviously streamed through Zoom as well. So it just shows the importance of, communication and how that transpires, because we are in what we call a video digital world now. And some of the things we're going to talk about is knowing your intention, voice and body language, including posture, controlling nerves, eye contact, through to listening, less is more, and authenticity, before we move on to actually discussing how that can be transferred into digital world. So when we were talking, Duncan, you came up with this list in terms of like the key elements of communication. So you highlighted 7 things on that list then, and why are these 7 key elements the most important?
They were the ones that came to me immediately, really, as the most important elements, because I think communication, particularly spoken communication, is such a big topic. We could talk for a few hours about the subject. There are books written about it. There are all sorts of talks given on the topic. I myself wrote my own book a couple of years ago on the topic to try to distill the key elements of spoken communication. They, for me, are, if you like, the top tips that we wanted to try and cover today.
Fantastic. So the first one being knowing your intention. So explain that one a little bit more.
I think the point is, Manni, about this is before anyone delivers any form of spoken communication, that could be, one-to-one meeting, it could be a team meeting, it could be delivering a keynote to a large audience. I think the danger is that it's not just about doing the preparation, but it's thinking through what it is you want to achieve. If you like, what are your aims and objectives? And when we talk about knowing your intention, or as I sometimes describe it, having a positive reason for delivering it, what it is you are about to deliver, I think it's thinking about what it is you are trying to get across. Because the danger is, I think, that people tend to go into things or say things which are sometimes convenient or, dare I say, expedient, without knowing the reasons behind it. So I think there are some questions almost to ask yourself prior to delivering a speech or a talk or a presentation. And that might be, what do you want your audience to know? What do you want them to think? What do you want them to maybe feel? Or what action do you want them to take? There may be a specific call to action you want them to to take as a result of what it is you're saying. So it's really thinking about and really being clear about each time you are presenting or communicating what it is you are trying to achieve.
And in the marketing world, in the digital world, in the common world that we are in now, that's probably the most important thing. I always say death by Zoom. That came around after the pandemic, where everything became a Zoom meeting, everything became a video call. And even now, some calls that we have planned in with clients or suppliers, they'll be booked in for half an hour, but really they only take 5-10 minutes. And a part of me thinks it could be an email as well. So knowing your intention is probably the most important thing. Like, we'll be at an exhibition tomorrow and we'll pick up contacts and leads from there. And then with others, from that conversation face to face, will we then lead on to do you want a 30-minute consultation? And then in that 30-minute consultation, because of the notes I'll take, I'll know exactly what that prospect client wants in terms of understanding, well, they want to talk about SEO and their GA, for example. And so I will focus the topic and the agenda on that to understand what are their pain points within that specific area, instead of going on a 30-minute pitch about Bobble, which I've already kind of done at the exhibition. Otherwise, they won't have given me their details. So yeah, knowing your intention, I think, is the most important thing. And it is that case with anything you do in life, in terms of if you're going into a meeting, have an agenda, what you want to achieve out of that meeting, what is the purpose of having that meeting, what do you want to do, what's the end result, have clear actions that you're going to have from the end of that meeting. If you're just in a meeting and end up talking about everything and anything, then that meeting wasn't really needed, and that's time and efficiency wasted. So yeah, communication, knowing your intention, very, very important. The next one is probably the most important, I think, the second most important one, which is voice and body language and posture. Explain that one.
Well, again, another big topic, but I think with the voice, we talk about verbal communication and non-verbal communication. If we look at the verbal communication, the voice, it's such a powerful instrument, and like any instrument, it needs practicing, it needs playing around with. So I think the key thing, whether you're online, of course, or face-to-face, is just really to keep the voice energized, to keep it modulated, to have some passion and energy behind what it is you are saying, rather than just speaking in a slightly monotone or de-energized way. And of course, there's lots of vocal exercises one can do around that. And of course, the importance of breathing, which is absolutely key. Breathing, of course, is life, but breathing correctly in order to control nerves is a very, very important thing to be able to practice. So the voice is vitally important, but equally the body language has to match what you're saying. So to have good, open body language, to have good posture, gives confidence to other people. And it shows that you can be authoritative from the way that you stand or from the way that you sit, rather than displaying negative body language, with arms crossed or looking away or shoulders hunched, that you don't, giving the impression that you don't really want to be there. And then that can be, as we are now online, or of course, as important is when you are face to face. So the voice and body language on our workshops that we deliver, Eaglei delivers, we usually do a couple of hours on developing those skills around the voice and body language. And I very often bring in an associate who is a professional actor, because of course the voice and the body language are the tools of trade for an actor. And they work with the delegates on how to use those to best effect.
Yeah, I was given a tip years back when I was first doing my interviews, and when you're going for grad schemes, you have telephone interviews and stuff like that. And the best tip I was given was, when you're talking, smile. When you're on the inside of the phone, smile, because you project a better voice. So sometimes you see me smiling on a podcast, everyone looking on YouTube, and yourself, Duncan, is because it naturally projects a better voice. And even though we record in the morning and I can see from Johnny looks tired, Callum looks tired, it is early in the morning and it's hard, but you've got to have that kind of voice. And that's why I'm a bit more physical with the way I say things, and I use my arms and my elements to try and get it aboard, especially when I'm talking. So at least some of these exhibitions, I will go out and I will talk and you've got, 100 people in front of you, and you're thinking, right, I need to keep these people's interest on a technical subject very engaged. So I'll throw in jokes in there. I'll make little quick quirks and remarks, keep them going. I'll even pick out a few people in the audience just like to get their viewpoint and elements like that. So yeah, and it's just important because when we talk about marketing isn't just external marketing, it's internal marketing. It's customer relationship management. So if you're on a meeting with a client, if I'm sat like this, hunched down and like looking at something else, looking at a second screen, I'm not really showing any kind of interest, they're going to be like, well, does he even want to be on this call? And this is our agency. So how you project and how you come across, and it's more important now because normally we would just do conference calls with clients back in the day. Now we do videos and team calls. They can physically see it. Unless you turn your video off, then it's different. And more, what I'm noticing is more people turning their videos off when they're doing Teams calls and elements like that. So yeah, and very, 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 very important. The next one that you talk about is...
I'll say you've got me thinking there, Manny, because it is early in the morning and I hope I look okay now.
I can tell for the audience, you look very, very good. And if you want to know what Duncan looks like, I'll have to review it on our YouTube in the morning. I really like the background image you got there. So the next one is controlling nerves. So always a difficult one. I always get those butterflies in my stomach. Even when I'm coming on a podcast and there's no one here and it's only like the cameraman and the producer looking at me and I have a guest, even though I project like I'm calm, sometimes I still get those butterflies in my stomach even before I talk. So what would your advice be on that?
Picking up on the butterflies, Manny, and I also have butterflies in my stomach. I had them this morning before we started this particular broadcast. The key thing is, and this is a lovely phrase, Manny, we need to try to get the butterflies to fly in formation. And one of the best ways I think of doing that is something I mentioned earlier, which is the importance of breathing. I often say to delegates when we're running our workshops, do you think that I am nervous? Do you think that I'm feeling nerves this morning? They say, no, because you've done this for so long. You must be so confident. Well, yes, I am confident in my subject, but I still feel the nerves because they're a new audience, because I want the day or the session to go well, of course. But what I do very often when I'm setting up the workshop or driving to the workshop, or this morning for 5 minutes or so before we actually hooked up online, I was doing some breathing exercises. I was taking some deep breaths in through the nose, some what we call diaphragmatic breathing. Because when we're nervous or fearful, our breathing rate begins to increase. We tend to breathe from our upper part of our chest rather than from deep breathing from our diaphragm. And before we started, I took 3 or 4 deeper breaths in through the stomach, in through the nose rather, and out through the mouth. And it helped to control the nerves that I was feeling at that particular time. And then we started speaking, and during the setup, you were helping to relax me we were just having a casual conversation about a few things. So that when we started, I felt that I was in control of the nerves. The issue is we need to psych ourselves in, not psych ourselves out. And for me, for a lot of people rather, nerves get the better of people because they're simply not sure how best to control them. It's not the only technique, but breathing is one of the best techniques.
Do you have any videos elements like this or elements? Because what I think would be useful for our listeners and our viewers would be, we'll put some links in our YouTube description of some really good breathing techniques to help calm your nerves before you're talking or pitching or going into that physical meeting. Or I get it, people have developed social anxiety from working from home due to the pandemic, and you might want to go on a client call. I know that's happens with some of my team members. I just said turn the video off, and then that way they feel a bit more calm and not having to, because it's that people are looking at me element, and you get it all the time. But I think that's good. So if you have any like quick exercises or videos or elements, let us know, or links to your website. We'll definitely put that on, because I think that'll help a lot of the viewers, because trust me, it helps. That breathing, there was a breathing technique that I was introduced to, which is a double breath. So you take your first breath in, but then you take another extra breath in, which apparently opens up all the elements of your lungs, and then breathe out your mouth, sorry. And that helps reduce stress significantly. So the other key element is like, obviously, eye contact. Obviously, we're on video. Obviously, you guys on YouTube, you see that I change my eye contact frequently between camera, between Duncan. Sometimes when I'm talking, it's important. If you're talking a specific element, you keep eye contact, and more importantly, you listen. So eye contact and listening.
I agree with you certainly about the eye contact. And it's something we may touch on later, I'm not sure. But one of the key things that always amazes me still now when I see people on Zoom or Teams or Skype or whatever platform they're using is they're not looking at the camera. They're looking at themselves, Manni, on the screen, or they're looking away to one side. It's different for you because you're conducting this interview and you're having to look at in different places. But I'm trying very hard to maintain my eye contact so that the people watching this feel that I'm actually talking to them rather than talking to someone else or in another direction. So that's really important. And just to the side of my particular camera on my laptop, I also have a little smiley face on a post-it note, which refers me back to your previous point about trying to remember to smile. Because the other thing the smile does, by the way, that we didn't mention earlier, is it helps to relax not just you, but it relaxes your audience. They can see you smiling, so they're more likely to think they're in safe hands and they will relax. But the smiling and the eye contact are also vital in spoken communication.
I'm guilty of that sometimes because it happens. You're on your laptop, you're on a Zoom, and a lot of it's second screen, if not third screen now. I think second screen is the norm, let alone it being like an add-on. And I get it. Sometimes I'll be looking at the results on that screen, and then my camera will be up here. So it's hard for me to constantly look at the camera. I just look at the screen and look at the Teams elements and communicate that way. But listening is quite important as well. We talked about listening. So what are your thoughts on listening?
Well, again, the danger here is that people respond with points they want to get across without really clearly listening to either the question or the point that the other person has made. You know, and the fact that we have two ears and one mouth, we need to be better at the way that we listen. So in terms of communication, I think communication is not just about what we say, but it's about how we listen to and interpret the information that we hear. So I think we really need to listen carefully to messages that are coming at us, points that are being made. And what I tried to do is I tried to distill from that key words or key phrases or key points that the other person has made and focus on that rather than coming back with the point that we want to get across, the point that we want to make. Because I think it's dangerous that you alienate the other person by just getting across what you want to say and not responding to what the point that they are making.
Yeah, because it's all two-way communication. If you're talking, if I'm speaking, or we're having this conversation, and even on this podcast, if I wasn't listening to you, what's the benefit? And then the audience can't see it. And if I'm distracted, I'm looking at other things and doing my thing, then what's the whole point of this? Again, in meetings, or if you're talking to a prospective client, it's important to really listen to what you're doing. If you're having that video or digital communication with someone, listening is probably is a very important tool. So we're just getting to the end of the points. You say less is more, and I couldn't agree more on this. And I talked about this earlier, where you're on calls and you're on team calls, you're on Zoom calls, and it goes on for an hour. And I'm like, it just didn't need to be an hour. When we summarize the points at the end, it's 4 or 5 points. Someone's talked about it. It's time consuming. I always say, and that's why I try and encourage less time on Teams and Zoom calls for the team, and actually focus more on actually doing the work and elements like that. And I'm trying to get that across to clients, and some clients actually understand. I was like, well, no, we don't need an hour. We can put it in for half an hour bi-weekly catch up, because I guarantee you, just come prepared to the meeting, know what it is or results you want to talk about, and we can get the most out of it. Because instead of wasting that extra half an hour, talking, we can use that half an hour actually implementing the changes of the work that's needed.
This is a really important point, Manni. We talk about less is more. And what I mean by that is whether it's in fact written communication or spoken communication, don't use 25 words when you can use 12. So I do an exercise sometimes with people where I say, this is the written communication, write me 100 words about your business or what you do. And they do that. And then I say, well done. Now could you summarize that in 50 words, which they then edit or précis, cutting out things. Then I say, well done. Now do it in 25. Now 12. Now 6. So give me 6 words that sum up the culture, the philosophy, the approach of what you do in your business. And we have to do the same, I think, when we speak. We all use too many words. So I'm a great believer that if you can say things in less words, it will have more impact. And one of the things that most people are guilty of doing is using filler words, or what I call redundant language, that don't mean anything. These are expressions like and and kind of like and so, or expressions like to be honest. So when someone says to me, to be honest, Duncan, I say, and my wife hates this, I say, have you not been honest with me up until now?
You know what? I feel guilty of that sometimes. If you look back at my podcast,
I'm not picking you up. I'm not accusing you of this, Manni. But we use this redundant language that doesn't mean anything. So try to say things using less words. It will have more impact. It's more direct, and it has more impact.
Yeah. Totally agree with that. I mean, as I was saying, sometimes I listen back to my podcast while I was driving, and I realize I do say the word or and elements like that, and it frustrates me because I don't realize I'm doing it. But again, it's not going to happen overnight. You know, whilst you're on calls and elements like that, or if you're in a sales position, you might find some filler word because you're trying to think what's the next thing I need to say. But just get to the point of what it is you're trying to say quicker and easier, and then let them respond. And then finally, as we begin to wrap up, authenticity. I think that's the key. I mean, if you look at this podcast, we try to be as authentic as possible. Some of my rants on this podcast, on certain episodes and elements like that in previous episodes, people know I try to be as authentic as possible, you know, authentic in terms of the quality of guests we have, like yourself, Duncan. So just quickly summarize authenticity for us.
Well, again, you know, there are books written on the subject. There are, you know, TED Talks about authenticity, leading exponents of authenticity, people like Brene Brown. I think that authenticity is the key word, the buzzword. Some people don't like it, actually. But when we talk about authenticity, really all we're saying is be genuine, be sincere, be truthful, ultimately be yourself. Everyone is unique and everyone has their own approach, in this case, to spoken communication. But for me, it falls really into 3 areas, which, again, we explore on our workshops. The first of these, when we talk about being authentic, is to be transparent. And what I mean by that is to be really clear about what it is you want to say, what it is you're trying to say, what you want to get across to the other person. The second is to have integrity. That is about having your values and your principles and your beliefs, again, behind what it is you're saying. And the third is to be vulnerable. And vulnerability for me is a strength. Some people consider it a weakness, but vulnerability for me is a strength. And that is about being sincere, again, and truthful and open to really all possibilities. And it's about showing up and really being present, being, as we say, in the moment of whatever it is you're communicating. So authenticity is probably, if I'm going to pick out one, is probably the most important trait that we try to engender, we try to support people to be in the work that we do.
I think summarizes it really, really great. I mean, if you look at it from a digital perspective, look at social media, the video posts that you see, the stuff you engage with, we tend to engage with stuff that's more authentic, transparent, a little bit more vulnerability kind of content generally. And that works better from an advertising perspective as well. Being transparent, being authentic. I mean, our video views might not be the highest on YouTube, or our streams might not be the highest, but at least we know we're creating authentic, real, content that's live and recorded at that time. So we've talked about all those points: knowing your intention, voice, body language, posture, controlling your nerves, eye contact, listening, less is more, and authenticity. And we've already talked about that in terms of how that can be transpired into digital world that we live in. So just to wrap up, any last bit of advice that you would summarize, I'm going to say in 12 words, Duncan, based on what you said, that you would give to anyone who's listening on this podcast about the importance of communication?
In 12 words. Okay,
so
don't count these.
I'm just going to let you.
Well, don't count these, but I'm just going to say, be yourself and be authentic, Manni.
Well, that was less. That was like 6 or 5. Be yourself and be authentic. Well, actually, that's 5. There you go. So, tells you, it works. Importance of communication. Less is more. So, thank you, Duncan, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. That's been very, very educational, very insightful. Even I've learned some elements from that talk. So, thank you for joining us.
Many thanks, Manni.
And thank you for you listening and watching on YouTube. Don't forget, you can send through questions at tagging us at Bobble Digital across all social media platforms, or use the hashtags Mr. Bobble, hashtag AskBobble, and BobblePod. And if you have any questions, we will try and pick it up on one of our podcasts. But thank you for joining us, and we look forward to catching up with you on our next episode. Cheers. Bye.